Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now, it was a bit of an unfortunate timing because just as I released my breakdown of the early gameplay samples, we actually got a full deep dive from Silk. And I must say that after watching the deep dive, I do feel somewhat more encouraged about Silk. I still think that there might be some potential issues, but I definitely am somewhat relieved because during the deep dive, even though it was never kind of like mentioned and the rotation specifically pointed out going for level 3, I also realized that you probably will not have to do that. And there is a very solid chance that just a regular level 2 rotation would provide you with good enough of a damage output, especially if you do the Relic chain combo thing, basically the same interaction that America Chavez has. That being said, I also think that Silk is not going to be a champion for everybody because she does quite clearly will have quite a demanding playstyle, as well as she's 100% optimized for usage with a relic, and I think that is going to be a core thing in her kit. Right, so let's jump into it and break it down. With a ton of physical vulnerabilities, which are smaller than I would have had hoped, you will be able to do quite a lot of physical hit damage as well, obviously, as very decent amount of burst. So, discussing her utility, the most important things would be the duration of ruptures and slows. So she's a champion that will be able to go up against any champions inflicting ruptures and reduce duration by 90%, which is going to be quite helpful. But realistically, this is going to be more as a defensive utility for both ruptures and slows, which typically will mean that you can't use ruptures or stop her special evade via slow. However, her special evade can be switched off and is, I think, more of an offensive kind of thing, because only thing you have to do is crit against her, and her special attack evade is going to go on cooldown. So it is 9 times out of 10 going to be used offensively more than defensively, because with this you can play much more aggressively and get more physical vulnerabilities on. And she does have this like very good safety net when you go for dashback intercepts and everything else, trying to maintain her physical vulnerabilities and everything else. Now, the physical vulnerability duration is like 1.2 seconds. So there will be zero room for error there. You will have to be incredibly fast in order to actually, let them stack. Any sort of hesitation, I think I am quite sure that you will not even have time to parry and then land a hit. So that is something that still will need to be tested. But she will quite heavily rely on dashback intercepts, super aggressive gameplay, and then chaining into the heavy attack and then into a special attack. So moving forward here, we can see that her special evade will serve as a very solid offensive utility because you will be able to recover it relatively quickly because you can gain it every 20 hits. And then you can use it, for instance, to evade the entire Mangog special attack or entire Punisher special attack, something like that. So I do think this is going to be one of the more desired abilities for her. And this is something that I think people will initially maybe underestimate, or it's very easy to underestimate it on the paper. But, fully evading any and all extremely damaging special attacks is super valuable. It is becoming even more valuable right now with the release of 7 stars and increase in block damage due to their stat focus, and obviously change in battleground scoring system and all that other stuff. It's a very powerful thing, and you can, call me on that, because this is going to be incredibly helpful for a ton of matchups offensively, and is one of the kind of better abilities for a science champion to deal with opponent's special attacks, in my opinion. And then obviously, yes, here we can see she's stacking her physical vulnerabilities. They last 1.2 seconds. They seemingly are relatively minor. You can get up to 50, but in order to get even close to 50, you will have to do the level 3 rotation. So I think you will probably be able to get to 20 something of these active at a time, without the special 3. And then Silk's physical vulnerability debuffs are refreshed when the opponent is struck and removed, when the opponent activates a special attack or is knocked down. That just means that they're going to go away quite quickly. After each special attack, they're going to disappear. Or if opponent throws a special attack, obviously, is something that's going to happen even more often. And it's kind of like a similar thing with her Furies as well. While charging heavy attack, if opponent is within striking distance and suffering from any of your physical vulnerability debuffs, you stun them, and then you gain a Fury attack, Fury as well, uh, with that. So that is, here we are. So yes, with heavy attacks, the first hit grants Silk a passive Fury, increasing her attack rating by 3,500. So that is quite a massive Fury, and you can get up to 3 stacks, and that is only possible with Relic, because in every other scenario you will basically lose that Fury immediately after you charge your heavy attack, because if you finish your heavy attack, opponent gets knocked down and you lose your Fury, or even if you charge your heavy attack and use special attack will knock them down. So the only way to actually get to 3 stacks of Fury sounds like you go to level 3, because that ignores this penalty, and then you charge into a heavy attack, interrupt with the Relic, do like a combo, charge into another heavy attack, get the third Fury. So it says max stack 3, but more than that would be absolutely impossible anyways, and only way to get to 3 Furies will be with a level 3 and a Relic, and you can get 2 of these Furies without level 3, with using Relic. With doing a combo, chaining it into a heavy attack, gaining your first Fury, interrupting your heavy attack with Relic, then doing a combo, chaining that into a heavy attack, getting your second Fury, and interrupting that with a special attack for the damage. So with that in mind, I do think a level 2 rotation will be still relatively effective. Obviously, level 3 rotation would take longer and do more damage, but I do hope that level 3 is not a must, and that 2 of these Furies, with all of this situation that I explained before, would be potent enough. So I really do hope that, and that is something obviously that will have to be tested and accounted for. Now, with heavy attacks, we explained that. Here we can see some examples of the burst damage, which, doesn't look too great, but we do not see the amount of Furies or the ramp up there, and it's only 13 of her passives. So level 2 also inflicts Sunder. Both special attacks 1 and 2 inflict a burst of physical damage at the last hit, but level 2 also inflicts Sunder, which basically removes opponent crit resistance and makes it 0, so it gives you more chance to crit on level 2. Here's the special 3 ability again, where you can ignore the personal Silk's knockdown effects with it. And the cool thing here is, in fact, that you inflict a stun passive for 4 seconds, which will give you enough time basically for 2 combos, or 1 combo and start the second combo. And while the stun is active, opponents have no combat power rate, and your combat power rate is increased by 100%, ensuring that you will be able to get a special attack. The level 3 rotation will undoubtedly be kind of like the most effective, as it does seem that she's primarily designed around it. Again, I think the success of this champion will quite largely depend whether you can do well enough without it. I think it's a very strong, very powerful special attack, definitely. But if Silk wants to be a mainstream popular champion, in my opinion, she has to perform well enough without this special attack. And then her awakened ability is where she gains the most meaningful aspects of her utility. Aside from ability to aid special attacks and inflict a ton of debuffs to opponent, everything else basically around her kit so far that we have discussed is just damage. And damage in itself is the best utility, but obviously you want more from your champions. Because, inflicting a burst of physical damage, that more damage, stacking up physical vulnerabilities, that improves your damage, everything else. And the only other bit that we discussed so far is that evade, which is something that's super important. Now, flow mechanic is going to be a bit interesting, because I think if it works well, he will be quite a popular science champion. but it definitely has drawbacks, because striking the opponent with a heavy attack or whilst their back is against the wall inflicts a slow debuff for 2 seconds. So that's a very, very, very short duration of that slow. And here is kind of the problem with a lot of these effects. You need to get opponent to the wall in the first place. And if your opponent awaits like crazy, then that would be a very slow and possibly troublesome thing where you basically need to go parry medium into heavy attack and do that several times. Or if your opponent's unstoppable, that could be potentially impossible to achieve, pushing them to heavy back against their wall. But nonetheless, so striking the opponent with a heavy attack or while their back is against the wall inflicts a slow debuff for 2 seconds, paused while Silk has a personal fury passive or whilst the opponent remains against the wall. So that paused while Silk has a personal fury passive is kind of a fancy way of saying it's paused whilst you are either charging your heavy attack or doing all of your shenanigans of painting relics and everything else. That's quite literally it. I suppose that's the best way to word it, but it, the takeaway here is that as you are charging your heavy attacks and throwing your relics and throwing your special attacks, you will have that slow active. Or whilst the opponent is against the wall is kind of like the second bit, which makes me believe that Silk's kit is possibly missing one kind of final puzzle piece. Because a way opponent could easily get out of this being against the wall situation is if they refuse to throw a special attack, which I think at large is going to be the biggest problem for Silk and quite a big of a deal breaker in a sense. You can kind of understand why at times you wouldn't want opponent to have a taunt, because as they throw a special attack, they immediately lose the physical vulnerabilities, and it might be better for you to try and push them to level 2. But at the same time, they will more often get away from the wall whilst you are baiting the special attack. So anything that could help you with that and also help you manipulate the AI to get more safe intercepts, because she will have the aggressive playstyle, would be like super helpful to her in my opinion. Then the last point is, whilst slow is active during Silk's attack, the opponent suffers minus 100%, 150% regeneration rate, which is good, which is additional ability to Silk to actually reverse the regeneration. It also leads me to think that I don't think her awakened ability is going to be a must-have Sig 200 type of situation, because slow duration doesn't change off it, and I think as long as you get Silk awakened, for vast majority of the time, the Sig level is not going to matter too much, because keep in mind that she will have some sort of regeneration reversal effect at a low Sig or a moderate Sig, but she was also going to likely have the slow debuff, the physical vulnerability debuffs, everything else that synergizes extremely well with not only inequity, obviously, but also despair. So even if you reverse opponent's regeneration only by like 40 or 50%, it will still go in minus and it will still be reversed due to despair, and will basically function similarly, just not as rapid. So I do not think she's going to be a champion that you have to take up to Sig 200 at all. However, she is going to be a champion that you will really want to be awakened. Because even though damage might not be affected, without this slow, she only has the special attack evade, which is quite slim when it comes in terms of utility. The other good thing about her that I didn't mention here so far is the fact that she's immune to her own precision, cannot be struck while dashing backwards, and each attack and precision mastery gives her more crit rating, which is good because pseudo debuff immune champions are some of my favorite champions, because if your champion is completely immune to debuffs, they do not interact with a ton of nodes that would give you a fury buff, that would give you an unstoppable buff, and so on and so forth, and Silk will. But at the same time, in a generic matchup, Silk will never trigger a buff by herself because she doesn't have any buffs in her own kit, and if you do not get that precision, you're immediately a lot better off at countering buffet nodes, power snack, mystic dispersion, stuff like that. So I really do like that aspect of her though. So ultimately, I still have my reservations, but I'm definitely more hopeful about Silk after, pondering it over and checking out her abilities more closely from the deep dive as I was from the initial gameplay sample. Now, synergy wise, I don't think there's anything super meaningful. There's synergy with Spider-Man, which slightly will increase Silk's damage in super long fights, which I don't think gives anything meaningful to her at all. And Spidey gains a guaranteed evade against opponent special attacks once per fight. It's nice, I suppose. It's not too bad. Now we have incoming degeneration effects from champions suffer minus 30% potency for each unique synergy champion on the team. So Silk and Spider-Gwen would put that at 60%. So if you have the synergy active, I think you're going to have the baseline minimum of 60%, can go up to 90% degen reduction. I think this is cool. I think this can be situational, but it's good to have. So you have less degen. And then with Black Cat, you have access to Spectre. And I think this one's kind of pointless because, I suppose it's nice for Black Cat. Again, with Despair, she can shut down opponent's regen as is, and it's not the type of thing you'd use Black Cat for to begin with. And Silk already reverses regen pretty much, so this kind of makes it more potent, but I just think it's pretty much pointless energy. But that's Silk so far. I do feel somewhat more optimistic, as I said, after I have seen this. And my first thing and most important thing, never you mind anything else. As we know in this game, if a champion is fast enough and has enough damage, that's like a baseline condition. If a champion does not, if a champion takes 5 minutes where others take 2 or 1 minute, no matter how good the abilities are, we're probably not going to pay too much attention to that. And that's why I think that level 3 thing is a very, very big deal. And in my personal opinion, whether Silk will succeed or fail as a champion pretty much entirely depends on the amount of damage that you can get out of her level 2 rotation. I think that is by far the most important thing. And let me know if you disagree or agree. But I'll catch you guys later. Bye. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about